Jesus made it very clear. He said, I set before you life or death, choose life. Dysfunction is death. I've heard this in church communities. I've heard this from so many people. The trick is to just have no expectations. That is a bunch of BS. Letting go is not for quitters. Letting go takes a huge amount of effort, and your heart has to stay in the game. If we're lacking the ability to develop and grow in our self-awareness, when a boundary or a need or an expectation is not met or gets crossed, then our bodies kind of go into self-protection mode. Oftentimes, if you're living an independent, isolated life, it's because you're not open to the spirit of truth confronting your deception. A lot of the reason why we're not living intentionally and we're living reactionary lives is because we don't actually spend time cultivating vision for our lives. Jesus invites us to transparency, and it's the transparency with Jesus that becomes the catalyst for genuine transformation. A lot of the times we're outsourcing to others to do something that we actually should be doing for ourselves. So intention demands effort, but so does choosing to live in autopilot or survival mode. The difference is one effort depletes you and one effort begins to sustain and fill you. And we're recording.
Live.
I am not going to copy you this time.
I was waiting.
I was present-minded enough not to do it, but I'll do it on my own. Just kidding.
Yeah.
Hi, Mariah.
Hi.
How's it
How are you?
going?
Good. It's as I previously mentioned before, like there's just a lot going on, a lot coming up. Overall good, and I'm processing it in such a different way this time around. So yeah, it's
Life is good. It's the first week of December right now when we are recording it. So the week we publish it will be the week of Christmas. I feel like I've been saying it for like the last month, but my hibernation instinct is kicking in full gear. And I
yeah.
honestly don't think I've ever felt it as much as I'm feeling it right now.
Hmm.
It feels a lot stronger this year, like the pull to stay in bed in the morning and wanting to put in 12-hour work days because I have so much work that needs to get done as we're winding down for the year and getting things ready for the new year. And 4:30 hits. And normally I could work until 9 or 10 and I'm like, I'm done. I literally have nothing left. I've wanted to feel frustrated about it, but I've been trying to be really just understanding and going, you know what? I don't have to. It doesn't have to get done. Why am I going to push myself to do something that doesn't have to get done
Yeah.
when what my body is clearly telling me it needs is rest?
That makes
But
sense.
I literally almost cried 2 nights ago because I had to put the dishes away in the dishwasher. I opened up the dishwasher and I like, "Oh, I had to put the dishes away." And then I stopped myself, I'm like, "What is going on? Why are you crying over having to put dishes away?" And it's just 'cause I'm so tired. And then I started thinking about our friend who's listening and, how she might be feeling and how, I just have me and my pets to take care of, but so many of our friends listening, it's not just you, it's you and your husband and your kids to take care of. I just had a heart of compassion for you in that moment. The end of the year is just a weightier time of year. I mean, it's the time of year where people struggle with a lot of seasonal depression, and it's a difficult time of year. It's a heavier time of year. A lot of pain that we've maybe been pushing through starts to surface, lost
Yeah.
relationships, areas in our lives that we might feel dissatisfied in, we come face to face with at this time of year. Um, and it can be heavy. It can feel heavy. So I was feeling that for somebody. I don't know who I was feeling that for, but I was feeling that for somebody. And I wanted to speak into it because it's seasonal. It's not going to be like that forever. And when these things surface, it is an opportunity for us to sit with it. It is an opportunity for us to work through and process it without exposing too much of what you're walking through right now. You were sharing how you've had some sadness and you've had some anger surfacing. You wanna share a little bit of that in, like, a vaguer way? Just so
Yeah.
that our friends can kind of learn from how you've pushed through in the past, but, like, what you're doing differently now? 'Cause you even
Yeah.
said, like, you've never noticed before the wintering. You've never noticed the hibernation instinct and the wanting to do less and the wanting to rest more and the feelings surfacing. You've never noticed that until this year. Do you think part of that is because we're talking about it?
Uh, I think it could be subconsciously. I'm starting to feel that hibernation want surfacing, because we're talking about it. But also this time around, as I was telling you, I'm way more self-aware, and I just feel now at this point in my life, I'm automatically noticing what comes up for me. So, same with me, not that I've been going to bed early or anything, I haven't been helping my case by trying to get more sleep. But just because I think there's a lot coming up for me right now, it has been harder for me to sleep at a decent time, so then I'll stay up late, and then my son wakes up earlier and I gotta, I get to be up with him early, but I definitely wanna stay in bed. I wanna get as much sleep as I can, and this time around, I have been noticing and I've been experiencing and facing a lot of sadness that's come from a longing, like a deep longing that I've always had. So, when it comes to, like, certain relationships in my life, some anger as well, and I think a part of it is being triggered from the sadness that I'm experiencing and the longing that I'm experiencing. I'm still mid-process, you know? Whereas before, on the holidays, like, if I were to look back circumstantially, I would say some heartbreaking things would happen, or that longing that I'm facing now has always been there. I just never really knew how to look within, or if it did come up, I didn't know how to deal with it, so just got pushed to the side. It just got shoved down until, next year comes around, but now I'm dealing with all these things, and it's so great because I'm looking at it through such different lenses because of my self-awareness, and if I'm being honest, and, because I'm mid-process, I know I still have some mind frame work to do with myself, because of some anger that was surfacing for me. I was telling you this morning that I was feeling a bit heavy, almost like depressed, but not I wouldn't label myself as depressed, but I was questioning myself, thinking about it. "Oh, I feel really heavy. I don't wanna really laugh. I don't really wanna engage the way I normally do, and why am I feeling that way? Is there a bit of anger that I'm suppressing?" Well, I wouldn't say there's anger that I'm suppressing. I felt all my anger yesterday. The thing is, and I think this is important to share, is when I did feel that anger, I have yet to reframe the
Mm,
mindset about my anger, because while I was in that anger, I was very critical, very judgmental, and I just kinda left it at that. I was like, "Okay, feel the anger," but I, just didn't really do the reframing work in that
yeah.
sense, and so, although I think maybe circumstances aren't necessarily super drastically different, I think it just feels a lot busier and a little bit more hectic and chaotic because of the things that are coming up within me that I'm also getting to process while still, showing up the best that I can, not out of a place of performance, but because of who I know I am and who I want to be and
Yeah.
continue to grow into. So,
Oh my gosh, I feel like today's episode is going to speak into everything you're going through, actually. Hearing you talk about it now and, like, knowing where this conversation is going, I'm like, "Dang, this is gonna be perfect." So, if you've been following us for the last few weeks, you know that we're at the tail end of a four-part series. This is part 4 of a four-part series that was inspired by the reality that holidays are a heavy time. There's a lot of expectations, there's a lot of stress. A lot of women, the majority of women, will often say things like, I can't wait for this season to be done with. So, as we were coming into this holiday season, I really wanted to try to create something to offer you that could help you not just get through the holidays, but actually enjoy this final season of the year, this final month of the year, the holiday season, and even possibly help you create more peace, help you create more presence, and even more pleasure as you go through these 4 or 5 weeks. So, We've already done part 1, 2, and 3. If you haven't yet listened to those, I highly recommend that you go back and listen to those because there's basically it was inspired by the 12 days of Christmas, and so every single episode has 3 different mindfulness practices that you can integrate into your life. We also shared some practical things that you could do, but the beautiful thing about this series is it's not just good for the holidays, it's just great for life in general. So today we're going to actually talk about expectations, tension, and letting go. And even what you were talking about, Mariah, I'm feeling all of these feelings, but I'm not letting it affect how I'm showing up, not out of performance, but what I'm hearing is out of intention. You know who you are and you want to be true to that in spite of what feelings you're feeling. You're not being emotionally reactive. You're not allowing yourself to come into agreement with the distorted thinking of emotional reasoning. You're like, I'm aware that I have these emotions coming up, but I'm not going to let them influence how I'm showing up in life because you're choosing to be intentional and not reactive.
Yeah.
And so there is a difference between performance. Performance would be like, I'm just not going to deal with this and I'm going to keep being who I think I need to be so that everybody likes me and life is easy.
Mhm.
And what you're doing is you're going, okay, this is for me to process through. I don't need to leak it out into every room that I'm in and every relationship that I have. So when I have the proper time and space to sit with these feelings and process them, and for you, the first step of that was letting yourself feel it without editing it, without filtering it. These are the things I'm so mad about. And just like letting it come out of you so you could even know what was going on inside of you. And maybe that's all that you had the room to do yesterday, but maybe in the next couple of days, you're going to, because now that it's come out and you know what's going on inside of you, now you can start working through managing expectations and figuring out what you might need to let go of. So,
Yeah.
all of the things that we're going to talk about today, you're literally walking through right now.
Yeah, when you named all 3 of those things, I was like, "Dang, that sounds really good. I need to listen to this episode." Yeah,
I love how God is so good like that. I feel like every episode, either you or Beth, or me, like one of the three of us or all of us, are like, yeah, this is how it relates to me right now.
right.
Because one of the things that I've really prayed over this podcast is that it would be relatable. That's why when I was crying over dishes in the sink, I'm like, this isn't even about me. I think I'm feeling somebody else right now. And you know what? I'm going to speak to the listener, and I don't know if this is you, but it might be somebody who's listening. What I was feeling in that moment that felt so foreign to my own state of consciousness, if I can use that term. I know this probably sounds all woo woo and fluffy and weird, but I'm in the business of working pretty intimately in a healing journey with women. A lot of the times, the Holy Spirit will let me feel what somebody else is going through so that I can have empathy for it and understand it and be able to be in it with them and help them navigate and process through it. I notice that a lot when I'm working with one-on-one clients. I'll have something going on in my head that I don't normally struggle with. And then I'll show up to a session and the client is struggling with that very thing. And I'm like, oh, I was feeling this person. So, but I felt the sensation that I got was that this woman was really tired of holding it all together. Whew, I'm gonna cry. And that she felt like she just always had to be strong and she always had to hold it together and keep it together. And that there was a part of her that was longing for a safe place to allow herself to come undone, and that she didn't have that. She didn't have that person. She didn't have that safe space that she could allow herself to be held by. And I think probably all of us can relate to that in some way. I know for me, like the Lord has become my holding place. Like I can allow myself to come undone in the presence of the Lord. And I also have a couple of friends, but friends are not always available, because everybody has their own life. And but for this particular person, I felt like you didn't feel like you had anywhere to go. And I just felt a heart of compassion for that, and this is not some shameless plug, but I do want to reiterate the fact that that is exactly what the holding space is going to be for, that we're starting in January. There are a lot of women, I think, that are powering through life and holding it all together for everyone around them, for your kids, for your husband, for your parents, for your siblings, for your friends, for your church community, and you feel like you have to hold it all together and you don't. You don't. And hopefully we can help you break free from that. And there's a lot of reasons why we feel like we have to hold it all together. Sometimes we feel like if we let ourselves fall apart, we'll never be able to be pieced back together. But I think it's normal that at the end of the year, we there can be a little bit of weariness that we feel. There can be a little bit of heaviness that we feel mentally, emotionally, physically, even relationally, things that maybe we've been putting up with for a year or for years. And here we are, it's the end of the year and we're still struggling with things. And it can be very easy in this time of year to give into discouragement. And the danger with that is that when we give into discouragement, it can very quickly turn into defeat. And so I just wanted to shed some light and illuminate the fact that many people are feeling this. You are not alone in that. This is not a you issue. This is a seasonal issue. And we don't talk about it openly with one another. But the evidence is there when we just look at the fact that this is the time of year when most people try to life. So it shows you that at a societal level, there's a lot of people internally struggling with something and they don't know what to do with it. I think for me, when I recognize that it's seasonal and I'm like, you know what, this is not a me problem. There's nothing wrong with my life. This is just seasonal. It's normal for these things to be surfacing. It's normal for me to not feel like I can put in a 12-hour day. There's nothing wrong. This is normal. It takes a little bit of the weight off of it. And then also, Ryan and I were talking about before we even got onto this call, the way that we think about things can either make it even more exhausting or can help support us in being resilient with it. And so I think for me, when I can acknowledge, well, there's nothing wrong with me, this is normal, and it will pass. It will pass. Like Mariah said, it'll just settle back into the bottom and surface back up maybe next year, or it'll pass in the sense that we can spend some time processing through it and working through it. And that choice is yours. But that's really what the holding space is going to be for. It's going to be a space where you can come and you can be held and you can learn how to process these harder things as they come up. And you can learn like a lot of the stuff we've been talking about for the last few months, like the mindfulness stuff, the distorted thinking stuff, the emotional intelligence stuff, the relational stuff. It's one thing to hear about it, but it's a very different thing to begin to integrate it. And that's what the holding space is for. It's to help you take what you're learning and begin to practice integrating it into your life. So, you want to add anything about the holding space, Mariah? Mariah's going to be there. Bethany's going to
I
be there.
am. Just a reminder that you are welcome to come as you are and just be. There's no pressure to share. There's no pressure to open up yourself and be vulnerable right off the bat. We welcome vulnerability, but it's not forced. And yeah, so come as you are. That's all.
Very well said. Very, very well said. Okay, so let's jump in. So I want you to keep in mind that, everything we're talking about these last 3 weeks and now four, it's not about you doing more, but it is about you living more consciously. It is about you being more in alignment with your most authentic self so that life can feel more fulfilling for you. So, if we're thinking of it like I have to do this and I have to do that and I have to do this, we're thinking of it in a task focused, and it's not about doing, it's about being. It's not I have to do this, like check off my to-do list box, right? It's about I want to practice being this way, because if I practice this state of being, my life will begin to feel more peaceful, present, pleasurable, playful, purposeful, all of the things that create a really fulfilling life. So that's it. Should we jump into expectations?
Yes.
I feel like the holidays can really amplify expectations for people. What do you think
Yeah.
about that?
I think it definitely can amplify expectations, especially because during the holidays, there tends to be a lot going on circumstantially, like we've talked about before in terms of gift giving, gift receiving, how you're gonna show up, who's gonna show up, and then maybe even expectations for how other people you think that they should show up. Or like we put a lot of expectations on others, but then we also have a lot of expectations for ourselves that might not be in alignment or in tune with what we really are able to do. So
Yeah.
yeah, I could see that.
A lot of what causes unnecessary stress in our lives and in our relationships are unspoken expectations or unconscious expectations. So maybe I know what I expect from Mariah, but if I'm not communicating clearly that expectation with her, that can create relational stress and discord, or it can just create emotional stress and discord within myself. A lot of women are expecting people people around them to be mind readers because we're so good at reading people's minds ourselves. And I remember I was renting my room to this girl, and she just lived with me for a short period of time, but there was this one morning, Mariah, where this was before I knew you, she came downstairs, like, stomping her feet. She was so upset, and I was like, is there a problem? Like, are you okay?" And she was, like, super passive aggressive, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I was like, "Clearly she's not fine," right? So I'm like, "Let me dig a little bit more," and I was like, "Did I do something? Like, is this about me?" And she was like, "Yeah." And it was just like, I had no idea. I
Oh
literally
no.
was like, "What did I do that she's so upset about?" And when I told her, "What did I do? What happened?" And she's like, "You should know. You should know."
Oh.
And I was just like, I'm not a mind reader. I have no idea what I did to you. But so many women show up in their relationships and their marriages. Like they show up this way. Like we're so good at knowing what you're thinking and why you're doing what you're doing. And everybody around us should be a mind reader too. And that's just not healthy relationship. Mind reading
Yeah.
is a form of cognitive distortion. Anytime we catch ourselves assuming we know what somebody else is thinking, you should stop yourself dead in your track and get curious instead of, the judgment of I know what this person is thinking. That's a toxic thought pattern that does not produce good fruit in your life. But also expecting people to know what we need or know what we want or what we're expecting, that's really dysfunctional for relationships as well, because everybody has different needs, different expectations, different reasons why they do what they do. And when we project ourselves onto other people, we're doing them, ourselves, and the relationship a huge disservice. Part of it is the unspoken expectations. And we could talk about how do you share your expectations? It's hard to do that. It's vulnerable to do that. But then there's this whole different realm of expectations, which is subconscious or unconscious expectations, where you don't even realize that this is an expectation that you have. Have you ever had a moment, Mariah, where you've had like relational frustration? And when you sit with yourself and you start doing the confronting work of, why am I so upset? What is this really about? And then you realize, ding, 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 ding. Oh, I have this expectation that I didn't even realize I had.
Yeah. I definitely have that and have experienced that. Not as much anymore for sure, but my marriage. Because when you said you were talking about women do this, and I was like, dude, yeah, I hear this a lot with women in their marriages, and I've been there, done that in my own marriage where um you just have all these expectations, and I've experienced that where I have expectations that I didn't even know was an expectation, because then I'll have a react or I had a reaction towards my husband because I had this expectation that was inside that I didn't know about. So then that reaction caused confrontation, and then the healthier version of me started to go and process like, okay, I had a reaction. I need a moment to go process. In that process, I find that I'm growing resentful because of maybe expectations that I've been having and been placing on him that I never communicated because I didn't even know that I had them or what they were. And just all the feelings that come up after that, like there's so much signs of expectations that you place on others that come up. And usually it's in the form of it starts as resentment or you're like really angry or frustrated and you start to blame, blame, blame. But really it's a you thing.
And most of the things we struggle with are us things. So good. No, so just a quick little Bumble story for our friend who's listening. Still talking to the guy, still talking, still it's still in play. Um, but last week there was a boundary that got crossed. And it taught me a lesson because I realized that in relationship, we do have needs and boundaries and expectations. And sometimes we don't even know what they are until they go unmet or they get crossed. And if we're lacking the ability to develop and grow in our self-awareness, when a boundary or a need or an expectation is not met or gets crossed, then our bodies kind of go into self-protection mode. I have to fight for myself. I have to protect myself. I have to provide for myself. And it's very easy to make the other person the bad guy or the bad girl. And now we're the victim because our boundary was crossed or our needs not being met or our expectations are not being met. But in
Yeah.
reality, in relationship with people, this is the process of building intimacy. This is the process of learning each other, is going, oof, okay, I didn't even know this was a boundary, but now I'm going to let you know this is a boundary that got crossed and I'm not going to make you feel bad about it. Like, I didn't even know this was an expectation. But now that I know, I'm not going to get mad at you for not meeting it because I also never articulated it to you, like you just
Yeah.
said, right? But now that I know about this part of me, it's my responsibility to share this part of me with you in a non-critical, non-contemptuous, non-defensive way, because I'm just sharing something about myself with you that you didn't have this information before. So,
Yeah.
100%.
Um, I was thinking about it right now, and I feel like is it safe to say that even when you learn to do that and you learn to relay all I mean, any expectations that you have with the person, it is safe to say that not all expectations are gonna be met, you know? Like, there's also an aspect of accepting that because then that's where you have to start learning how to manage your
Yeah.
expectations at that point.
Yeah, 100%, because we talked about unspoken expectations, unrealistic or unspoken expectations, unconscious expectations, but there's also unrealistic expectations. Yeah,
Yeah.
for sure. And sometimes what I've experienced in my own personal journey, but then also working with women, is a lot of the times we're outsourcing to others to do something that we actually should be doing for ourselves. Or we're expecting things from people and they literally it's not because 'cause they're bad people, but they don't have the capacity, either the capacity or the capability to provide that. They can't show up in the way that we're expecting them to. And
Mhm.
part of living beautifully and showing up in a healthy relationship is being able to accept people with where they're at and what they're capable of. Now that doesn't mean abuse, that doesn't mean, right, but accepting this is where you're at. And then I have to decide what I'm going to do with that. Instead of being resentful of you for not being able to be the version of you that I think you should be, which we
Yeah.
do. We
Mhm.
do it so much. I have an idea in my mind of who I think you should be and what I think you should provide me with. And then when you don't do that, I will get resentful. I will get critical. I will start making judgments about your character. It becomes like a character assassination. I will start withholding myself from you. And there's a million different things that we can do. But part of the problem is we're expecting other people to do things that they're not actually responsible for, and or we're expecting people to be versions of themselves that is not true to who they are or where they're at in life.
Yeah.
You hear this a lot, Mariah. I heard this for years and I thought that this was the goal. don't have any expectations.
Oh my gosh, I've heard that too.
I've heard this. I've heard this in church communities. I've heard this from so many people. The trick is to just have no expectations. That is a bunch of BS. It is very human to have expectations, and it's actually healthy to have expectations, and it's actually part of healthy relationships to have expectations of one another. But they have to be spoken and they have to be realistic. And also, we have to be willing to adjust and adapt. I might have an expectation for Mariah, and she can hear that expectation and say, I can't meet that. And I have to be willing to go, okay, well, how can we create a win-win? Because this is something that I need. And how can we adjust and adapt towards one another? That's part of being in relationship with one another, whether it's friendship, whether it's parent child, whether it's husband, wife, boyfriend, girlfriend, best friends. Like, I mean, obviously, parent child, I mean more like the adult parent child relationships, not the child parent relationship. But yeah, I think having those conversations and not being like, well, this is my expectation and you have to meet it, right? No, it's, hey, I have this expectation. Can we talk about it? Do you think that this is something you have the capacity or capability for? In being open and going, what's going to work for us? How can we come to agreement that both parties are mutually honored and respected in?
Right. But would you say that is only achievable if the other party is willing to? Because there's also some people that are not like you express that in the best way you can. You're going about it in a healthy way and they're just like poo poo to your feelings, poo poo, you're crazy, or they like very dismissive maybe. And then at that point you would have to still kind of deal with that and manage your expectations maybe differently
Yeah,
on your own.
definitely. Definitely. Because again, it goes back to you can't expect people to be who they're not capable of being at this time,
Yeah.
right? So then you have to decide. There are people, for example, in my life that they're not showing up in a way that communicates value, that builds trust. They're not showing up in that way. And so there is a measure of distance that's created in the connection because of their choices, right? You can't
Yeah.
have full access to me if you're going to treat me like I don't matter to you and if I can't trust you.
Yeah.
Right? And again, that goes back to boundaries because if I do that, then I'm not taking care of me. I'm not guarding my heart in a healthy way. I'm not guarding my energy. I've learned over the years, I'd rather give my energy where it's fruitful than pour myself out where it's wasteful. Because then that's draining and depleting. Whereas if I'm pouring myself into relationships that are fruitful, there's a fulfillment in that. I've had to adjust my expectations of people and also the amount of access that maybe I'm giving them, or maybe the amount of like maybe I would in a normal relationship want to, with a mentee or with a friend, reach out like once a week or whatever. And maybe I'm consciously choosing to hold back because I know that the relationship's not in a place where that would be valued. And it would
Yeah.
not be a rewarding experience for either of us. So I have to choose to adjust my expectations at that point. The trick in that, though, is not allowing your heart to get hardened.
Yeah, I think that's where it goes really south for a lot of people is they get super hardened quickly, and it is I feel like a little bit more painful to kind of stay open and keep your heart open, but it's also from my experience it's been the most like rewarding and healing as well when you do keep your heart open.
Yeah, definitely. Well, the tendency is to self protect. So that hardening of heart and getting really good at building cases against people and turning them into the villain or whatever it is that we do, creating stories about them. A, it's not loving. B, it's not true. Most people are not bad people. Most people are just doing the best they can with where they're at. A
Right.
lot of people are living in a delusion. Like something I was crying about this morning. I'm like, oh, like there's these people in my life that I care for so much, but I can't have the level of relationship that I would want with them because they're all living in some form of delusion right now and they think they're really good and they're not good. It's heartbreaking. And I could build up a case against them, but I don't. I have to be okay with sitting in the hurt. right? I
Yeah.
have to be okay with this is painful. I can accept it. I can accept you for who you are and where you're at. And I'm not going to label you or judge you. And I also recognize that if I don't harden my heart, I'm going to keep feeling this hurt. And it doesn't mean that I live in a perpetual state of hurt. It just means
Yeah.
that from time to time, that longing will well up in me. And I'm like, man, I wish things were different in this relationship. I wish there was some reconciliation. I wish there was some restoration. And I'm sad that there's nothing that I can do right now to make that happen because
Right.
because it's not really up to me. It's the choices that they're making in their life. And a lot of
Yeah.
people have relationships like that in their lives. But the trick is to not harden our heart to the hurt.
Yeah.
I would rather feel the hurt from time to time than live with a perpetually hardened heart.
Yeah. Because that hurts a lot more in the long run. Like,
Yeah.
it hurts in so many different aspects. You don't feel it, but you will eventually.
Yeah. And then on the other side of things, there are relationships in my life that I have with people that are not necessarily where I would want them to be, but they're so much better than could be. And a lot of that has to do with the fact that I've been able to accept them for where they're at and what they have to offer. And I'm
Right.
like, you know what? This is who they are. This is where they're at. This is what they have to offer. I've managed my expectations. I let them off the leash. I let my expectations go of ideally what things would look like in this dynamic. And because I can accept this person for where they're at and what they're capable of, it's actually permitted for this really beautiful dynamic to grow between us. And I really enjoy this person's company. Do we have the emotional intimacy that I would like? No. But I also think sometimes when we take expectations off of people and we accept them where they're at, we give them room to breathe and grow.
Yeah.
Expectations, when I expect you to be who I expect you to be and you can't be that, it can be stifling.
Right.
Whereas if I just say, you know what, this is where you're at, this is your capacity, this is your capability, and I'm going to accept you for who you are and where you're at right now, which is what Jesus does with us, by the way. Right? That's what Jesus
Right.
does with us. So how dare we expect any to think we should show up any differently in relationships? But then what happens is that acceptance is what gives people the room to breathe and the room to grow.
Yeah. Just now when you brought up that is how Jesus is with us, it made me think of beginning of my journey, my walk with Jesus is knowing that I felt like I could just come as I am truly and get to know him and know that he knows me and he accepts me. Not that he's going to leave me where I'm at, but he says, come as you are. So the freedom in that as well, it just leaves a lot of space for healing, for growth if you're wanting to grow also. But yeah, it's so true, and I think that's where, like, people get religious because 'cause they're like, "Oh, Jesus has this expectations of you. He says, 'Follow XYZ, follow all these rules,' and there's no room to, like, make mistake or be imperfect." Like, almost like you're not human.
Yeah. Well, and that's what religion produces, a performance.
Mhm.
Jesus invites us to transparency, and it's the transparency with Jesus that becomes the catalyst for genuine transformation.
Right.
Remember I had a pastor in my college years, Greg Krieger, and he would pray this all the time, and it so marked me. And he would say, "Jesus, thank you that you love us just the way that we are, but that you also love us way too much to keep us this way."
That's so good. Wow.
You know? So, it's Jesus's kindness that leads us to repentance, which is learning to look at things differently. It's changing the way we look at things. That's what repentance is. It's not looking at things through our lens or through society's lens or through religion's lens or through our parents' lens. It's learning to look at things through the lens of Christ. It's having the mind of Christ. It's seeing things the way Christ sees them clearly. that illumination that comes with transparency, where we allow him to look into all of those dark places and bring illumination. And so then we can see things more clearly. And then I think it's easier to see people like, oh, okay, this is where you're at. This is not who you are. I'm not going to label you as anything because
Mhm.
you're an image bearer of Christ. You were made in Christ's image and likeness. I know what you're capable of. I know what God can grow you into, but this is where you're at. And because Jesus loves me and accepts me where I'm at, I'm committed to learning and practicing, growing in being able to do the same for others. I don't do it 100% of the time very well. There are some people in my life I struggle with that more than others, but I'm committed to growing in it. And when I catch myself getting into that labeling or judging or whatever, I have to confess and I have to correct course. You know? Anything else on expectations?
No, I was gonna point out that it does take intention.
Well, and that's our
Intention.
next point. That's our next point. Yeah. And because if you're living in autopilot or you're living in survival mode, you're not giving yourself the space to self-reflect. And if you're not giving yourself the space to self-reflect, you're not having the space to develop self-awareness. And it's through the work of self-awareness that you actually discover what those expectations are.
Right.
Otherwise, your unconscious, subconscious is calling the shots.
Yeah.
And you're living in that lower level self-awareness realm, which if you haven't watched the self-awareness episode, the 7 levels of self-awareness, it's episode 5. It's called self-awareness or how well do you know yourself, depending on what platform you're watching it on. But I would highly recommend giving that one a listen. Um, because there's a lot of misunderstanding around self-awareness. 95% of the population considers themselves to be self-aware, but only 5 to 10% of the population is actually self-aware. So
Yeah.
chances are you're not as self-aware as you think you are, and that's okay. The question is, what do we do about it, right?
Right.
So, intentionality is really is key. 55% of women claim that they're living life feeling burnt out. That's more than half of women are living life feeling burnt out. And
Yeah.
burnout is a symptom of deeper things. And one of the ways that you can eradicate burnout from your life is learning how to live. And again, this is a mindfulness practice. This is a practice intentionally, learning how to live intentionally and not reactively,
Yeah.
not in autopilot. So intention is Mariah. I think you shared this in episode 3, where it was like choosing who you want to be, how you want to show up to things. So
Mhm.
when we're talking about intention, that's what we're talking about. It's the how and the who. How do you want to show up? Who do you want to become? How do you want people to feel around you? That's the level of intention. We're not talking about things you want to accomplish or that kind of stuff. And it's not that you can't live intentionally in those ways as well. But oftentimes the things that we accomplish, they're an overflow and an extension of who we are. And it's more important how we're accomplishing what we're accomplishing than what we're accomplishing.
Yeah. Right.
So I looked up the word intention because I'm a geek when it comes to words.
Good.
I'm a
I
creative
was
word girl.
literally thinking, like, is there a definition you have for
Yeah.
intention? I feel like that would definitely,
I looked up the etymology. I'm more of an etymology girl, but I looked up the etymology and this is what it says. Intention is to stretch out. It's a straining, it's exertion, it's effort, it's attention, it's to turn one's attention towards. So think about that intention. We talked about living in the tension of intention, right? It's going, okay, this is where I am, but this is what I'm aiming myself towards. And there is effort required in that. But the effort that we put towards being intentional, again, is fruitful. It produces life, it produces joy, it produces freedom, it produces increase in the sense of increase of peace, oftentimes, even increase of productivity, oftentimes, increase of connection in relationships. Because a lot of people, one of the things that really bothers me is this whole concept of you see the reels on Instagram that
Yes,
pop up, and it's like,
yes.
if you text me, don't expect to text back for like 3 months. It's very
No.
dismissive. It's very low relational intelligence to not respond to people that you apparently value. But
Right.
that's become the status quo in our society. That's normal. It's normal. You're expected to accept that from people because that's just the way the majority of people are showing up.
Yeah. Well,
I'm not
people,
going to
like,
respond to you.
right, and I think the attitude behind it is glorified. Like, "Oh, this is cute." It's cute to be toxic. It's cute to have low relational intelligence. Like, "Hee hee, I'm not gonna respond, and that's just me. You can count on me to be this way." And it's almost like people have learned to love and accept the dysfunction and love being labeled as such. It's weird. It's a weird kind of deception.
Yeah. And I don't even know if it's seen as dysfunction for most people though. I think for
Mm-mm.
most people, it's like, "Oh, I'm just forgetful and I'm just busy," and all these justifications around it. But really, it is very dysfunctional. It's not the way to honor the relationships that you say mean the most. And also, it's very anxiety producing. If you
Mhm.
have a bunch of people that you haven't gotten back to, and deep down inside, if you have a conscious, I should not be ignoring, dismissing, avoiding, right?
Yeah.
Avoidance creates anxiety. So it doesn't add to your life anything positive. But I don't think most people do it maliciously. I think it's because most people are overwhelmed, burnt out, and
Mhm.
stretched thin, and they're forgetting. They're not operating from an optimal place. So they're genuinely forgetting, but really it's a lack of intention and it's showing up in one area of your life, but it's indicative of every area of your life.
Yeah.
Intention, I think it's coming up with a purpose first. Why am I doing this? What is important about this for me? And then a plan. Okay, then how am I going to go about this? And then you have to pair it with action. Because also you hear people like, oh, I meant to get back to you and I didn't. Oh, I meant to do this, but I didn't. I had good intentions. Your good intentions mean nothing if there's no action.
Boom.
That's like faith without works is dead. Like, good
Yeah.
intentions mean nothing. Now, listen, this is not all or nothing, black or white. We're not speaking in extreme terms here. Of course, if I'm growing in intention, if I'm developing a new habit in my life, I'm going to miss the mark more times than I hit it. Right?
Yeah.
As we're growing in anything, the intention is there. I'm aiming myself towards something. I'm turning my attention towards a desired outcome. And I'm going to miss the mark multiple times because we always say everything is a practice. It's what we're practicing, right? So if there's consistent effort and we miss the mark, that's one thing. There's so much grace for that. But when we're just using intention as an excuse to justify lazy relational behavior or constant dysfunction in our own lives, that's a problem. And there's no grace for that. There should like there should be no grace for that. Grace is meant to help us grow, not keep us stuck and complacent.
So I was gonna ask, because I feel like I see a lot of people that are in dysfunction and don't think that it's dysfunctional. But what would be a telltale sign for our friend who's listening? Like, what would be one of those fruits that they could pay attention to or see that would help them maybe reflect inward and be like, "Oh, do I do that?" And kinda help them get to that point.
If you're living in a state of burnout or overwhelm, if it happens from time to time, that's one thing. But if you are living in a state of burnout or overwhelm, you are tolerating dysfunction in your life. If you are living in a state of anxiety or apathy, so
Mhm.
anxiety is like caring too much, worrying too much, stressing out too much. Apathy is checked out, numbed out, unbothered, either of those
Mhm.
two extremes. If you're showing up in life with a mindset of lack, not enough time, not enough resources, not enough ability, not enough anywhere that lack or scarcity is showing up, it's a sign of deeper dysfunctional belief systems, lies that you're believing. So when I'm talking about dysfunction, I'm not talking about dysfunction from a place of shame or judgment at all. When I talk about dysfunction, we're all human. We all have some dysfunction in our lives. Some of us have done more of the internal work to bring restoration and redemption and renewal into those places than others. But when I talk about dysfunction, I'm talking about lies that we're believing about ourselves, about society, about others, about relationship, about God, lies that we're believing that need to be replaced with truth. Or I'm talking about wounds, deep soul wounds that we've gone through that have shaped who we've become and how we perceive life and how we process life that still need healing. That's what I mean. So it's very gentle, right? It's lies you're believing or wounds that still need healing. That's what creates the dysfunction in our life. So it's not something to be ashamed of. We all have different measures of dysfunction. Again, it just comes down to some of us are doing that internal work and some of us are not. And there's a lot of I don't have time. I don't have energy. It's not the season. There's a lot of excuses that people make to justify living in lives that they're completely dissatisfied in.
Mhm.
That's probably the thing that makes me the angriest. I get so angry with that. Why are you
Yeah.
choosing this for yourself? Right? There's a lot of excuses we make.
Yeah.
But the truth is it's very depleting. Jesus made it very clear. He said, "I set before you life or death, choose life." Dysfunction is death. Dysfunction leads to a life of depletion, of disconnection, of delusion, self-deception. When we're living that dysfunctional life, there's very little reward in that. There's zero soul prosperity in that. And it is draining. Dysfunction drains us. That's why so many
Mhm.
people are self-medicating in some way. It's because they're absolutely depleted in life and they're
Yeah.
trying to fill themselves up with all of the wrong things.
Yeah.
Busyness, social media, stuff, alcohol, over-the-counter
Yeah.
drugs, food, you name it, right? Shopping, Amazon Prime, bing, 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 bing.
Mhm.
Um, Living intentionally and aiming ourselves towards doing the inner work of growing and healing those wounds and dismantling the lies and restoring truth in our souls and in our spirits. Yes, it takes effort and it takes energy, but it's the kind of effort and energy that is life giving. It becomes fuel. It becomes passion. It invigorates you. It begins to add meaning to your life. It begins to add fulfillment to your life. You start to live more inspired and creative. And if you're not living that way, you're not really living, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
So intention demands effort, but so does choosing to live in autopilot or survival mode. The difference is one effort depletes you and one effort begins to sustain and fill you.
Yeah. Love that. That was so good. And I just wanted to add, not that we haven't touched on this, but it shows up in your relationship and your relationships around you, and that is something to definitely pay attention to. What are the quality of your relationships? What kind of relationships are you attracting? How are you showing up in the relationships? All those things too. So, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah. I mean,
Or
if
even
you're
having
really
no relationships, right? There's
people
some
have
people who are
no
like, "I don't
relationship.
need people. I'm good on my own and maybe one other person in my life. I'm good." I know some people like that.
Yeah, no, it's a spirit of independence. It's a spirit of pride. Oftentimes, if that person is going to be really honest with themselves, it's out of self-protection.
Mm.
They People who choose to live like that are often not open to others bursting their own delusion. I know it's like my buzzword right now because I'm like, everybody's living in a delusion. Not everybody, but I'm, being dramatic. But like so many people are delusional. Like
Yeah.
crazy to me, the delusion that people create to make their lives palatable. When you lie to yourself enough times, you become a liar. There
Mhm.
is a spirit of truth and there is a spirit of deception. Oftentimes, if you're living an independent, isolated life, it's because you're not open to the spirit of truth confronting your deception.
Mhm.
The spirit of deception tries to isolate you or works to keep you surrounded by people who will reinforce your own destructive delusion. I mean, I've ticked a lot of people off in my lifetime because they don't want to hear the truth. And it's
Yeah.
easier to blame the person for A, B, and C than to look at yourself and go, oh man, that stung, but that's true.
Right.
So yeah, I would say, if your relationships are shallow, if everybody you hang out with is always just having fun and a good time, good vibes only, dysfunction. There's dysfunction. A healthy life is not good vibes only. A healthy life is not relationships that stay in the shallow end. And again, there's nothing wrong with you. I mean, obviously, if you're listening to this podcast, you have a desire to be honest with yourself. You are at least curious and open to learning how to have compassionate inquiry and learn how to challenge yourself in a really productive way. So nobody listening to this podcast is who we're talking about right now. But we've probably all been there at one point. I know I have. If you can't have somebody call you out in your life, not anybody, not randos on Instagram, right? But people that you're living life on life with, people that you're living open to. If they can't call you out on things or challenge the way you look at things, challenge what you believe to be true about yourself, question that. Question that.
That's an intentional relationship right there.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Absolutely. I think Jesus was very intentional also. He was not reactive. He didn't take other people's crises on as himself. This can happen during the holidays where this person needs that and this person needs that and we start spreading ourselves thin because we're not staying in our own lane. Like Jesus was really good at staying in his own lane. He knew what he was responsible for and he knew what he was not responsible for and he did not step out of his lane. And I've used this example before. I think it was in our self care episode. Lazarus, they come and say, hey, your friend is really sick. And he doesn't drop and like run. He doesn't turn their crises into his crises. He keeps doing what he needed to do. And then he goes. And by the time he gets there, Lazarus has died, but he knows, oh, I'm going to resurrect Lazarus. So I think the intention is who, again, it comes back to who do I want to be? How do I want to live? How do I want people to feel around me? And then what do I do to make that a reality in my life? If I'm not being intentional with my energy management, I'm going to be depleted and people are going to get the worst. They're going to get cranky, Tanya,
Mhm.
right? Easily irritated, Tanya. If I'm not managing my energy well, I'm responsible for that. And that means that I have to get intentional about what I'm giving my yeses and nos to.
Yeah.
How do you find that growing in your intentionality has impacted your life and your relationships? You're a very intentional person, especially for your age.
Thank you. I have found that, 1, the intentionality that I choose helps me to stay true to me, even if it's hard. Sometimes it's hard because the dysfunctional part of me wants to not be intentional, and the dysfunctional part of me wants to shove the issues that come up in relationship. Even the healthy relationships have issues, like, they just come up. The dysfunctional me wants to push them aside and pretend like everything's all good and there's nothing that needs to be talked about, and that's one of the things I feel like I'm currently facing, so good that I'm able to speak into it, but because I choose intentionality, I have the choice to bring it to the light, be true to myself, express myself for not only the sake of me, but for the sake of the relationship. So, better quality relationships, choosing intentionality, better health within myself, my mindset, my heart, um, and just experiencing life in such a different way that I'm not being crushed by life, my circumstances, or what's coming up within me because everything, every aspect of what I'm going through, I'm being intentional with facing and dealing with and not shoving it to the side. So it's all great things. And as you said before, it's not easy, but there is an ease in it because it's true, it's honest, it is maybe my reality or the reality, but either way, it's not the end of the world. So, yeah,
I think also it's important to realize there's two things I want to say about intentionality, and then we'll move on to the next point. But one is that God is very intentional in everything that he does. And so it's in our nature, it's in our divine nature to live intentionally. So
yeah,
any excuses that we come into agreement that prevent us from showing up in that way means that we are reinforcing choices in our life that prevent us from living into the authentic expression of who we are.
yeah, right,
Because you at your authentic self, you at your truest, most God-like self is a highly intentional woman. And so to compromise that in any way is to settle for less for yourself and of yourself than you were divinely designed to embody. And it will rob your life in some way. Because anytime we settle for less than what God has created us for and calls us to, we are not receiving the fullness that He has for us. And
yeah,
so there will be a measure of lack of fulfillment in our own personal lives and as well in our relationships.
right,
So there's no excuses.
yeah,
No excuses. The other point that I lost but came back to me is that there's a verse in Proverbs. Proverbs is a book in the Bible. It's in the Old Testament. Some would call that the Hebrew Bible. And it's a book that is known for its wisdom. Okay. You know, people say there's no life manual on how to live life. Yes, there is. It's called the Bible, and Proverbs is a really great place to start. So, um, and there's a passage in Proverbs that says, for lack of vision, people perish.
yeah,
A lot of the reason why we're not living intentionally and we're living reactionary lives is because we don't actually spend time cultivating vision for our lives. Now, some people can do this in the natural realm. They can create vision for themselves. And you see this, like, I manifested this for myself and all this kind of stuff, right? There are great visionaries in this world that create vision for their lives and they go and they accomplish and achieve it. But even then, they're not satisfied or fulfilled because they're living out the ability to do what God has created them to do apart from doing it with God.
mm,
We're created to be co-creators of our lives. We're not meant to just go and create our own story. The word of God says that before he formed the foundations of this world, he knew us. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, and they're plans for a future for you to hope for and not to harm you." So the truth is that God already has our identity embedded into our spiritual coding and the destiny that we were intended to be on this planet to fulfill. And we can only live into the fulfillment of that through relationship with Him and learning to dream with Him and creating vision, catching His vision, heaven's vision for our lives, and then partnering ourselves with that vision, intentionally aiming ourselves to the accomplishment of that vision. And that vision has far more to do with who we're becoming than what we accomplish.
yeah,
It's Christ's likeness being refined within us, and the reason why I think that for lack of vision, people perish is because when we don't have that clear vision of who did God create me to be and what has God called me to accomplish, and how, then I'm very loosey goosey with my boundaries and I can be giving myself to the wrong things. I can be expending my effort on the wrong things. And that's why I think for lack of vision, people perish. We die. It robs us of our life. It robs us of our joy. It robs us of our peace. It robs us relationally. It robs us of intimacy with God when we're just like trying to survive. We were not created to survive. We were literally created to thrive. And God gives us everything that we need to be able to do so. But we have to
Yeah.
pull back from this culture and this society that has normalized dysfunction, and we have to begin to align ourselves with the perspective of heaven and what is the truth. And then how do I purge myself, purify myself from everything? I was just going through week 42 of the Bible study, the Sacred Pause. And it's about that. It's in Ezekiel. We're reading in Ezekiel, and it's talking about how, God puts the metal in the fire, and he does it to purify the silver, anything that is not the dross, right? The dross is the fake metal. The dross looks like it's of high value, but it's worthless. It burns
Right.
away in the fire. And the goldsmith, the metal worker, keeps the metal in the flame to burn away the dross. That's every impurity within us that prevents Christ's image being made full within us. We can't be reflectors of him when we're so full of ourselves. And he keeps it in the fire and he refines us so that we can become the priceless metal that we were meant to be, and his image can be reflected within us. But we have to choose that. You don't get to that point when you're trying to live in survival mode or in autopilot, or you're trying to protect yourself from discomfort and idolize ease. It doesn't happen that way. So intentionality is a huge key to setting intentions through the holidays. How do you want to show up? Who do you want to be? How do you want people to feel around you? What do you need? And what can you do? We already talked about needs in a previous episode, but what can you do to ensure that those needs get met in a really healthy way? But then in life in general,
Yeah.
95% of the population think they're self-aware, but only 5 to 10% of the population are. That means that only 5 to 10 of the percent of the population are truly living intentional lives, because you can't foster self-awareness apart from the practice of intentionality.
Yeah. So true.
So I'm beating this one hard because it's so important. It's so important. Oh, and then the last point that I think will really help us enjoy the holidays, be able to be present through the holidays, be able to embrace all of the beauty that the holidays hold, is practicing the ability of being able to let go. Now, what does letting go not mean?
Letting go is not apathy. Like,
Apathy, 100%. That's what I had. Letting go is not apathy. Apathy is not caring. I don't care. I've stopped caring about this. That's not letting go. That's apathy. You've checked out. Your heart has now checked out. You're not in the game of life anymore. You've quit. Okay. Apathy is for quitters. Letting go is not for quitters. Letting go takes a huge amount of effort, and your heart has to stay in the game. And letting go is not a sign of weakness. Sometimes we get into these power struggles and we think, if I let this battle go, I've lost. I'm weak. No.
yeah.
Sometimes letting go is the strongest thing to do, because sometimes valuing the relationship is more important than being right. And letting go is also not giving up. So, what is letting go? How would you describe what the genuine practice of letting go? What is it?
I would say letting go has an element of acceptance for things you can't change that are out of your control, but also that saying, knowing that you can do something about the things that you can change, but you have to know what is yours and what is not yours. And so it's kind of giving that up, like it's not mine. It's not mine. That takes a load off when you have that revelation of this is not mine. I am letting it go. It has to do with a lot of acceptance and
Yeah, well, peace is often found on the other side of letting things go that you don't have control over.
yeah.
Absolutely. So you're thinking of the serenity prayer from the recovery rooms, right? God grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change and the
Mhm.
courage to change the things I can. That's the genuine heart of letting go. I'm accepting the things that are outside of my sphere of control, but I'm not checking out. I'm going to work on the things that are in my control. Letting go is like asking yourself, what is in my control and what is not in my control? And also, what am I responsible for and what am I not responsible for? Letting go of what I'm not responsible for while still holding myself accountable for the things that I am responsible for. Sometimes letting go is as simple as letting go of old belief systems that no longer serve you.
Right.
Not everything we believe is true. Not everything we
Yeah.
feel is true. Sometimes letting go is letting go of emotions that no longer serve us. Sometimes
Yeah.
letting go is letting go of relational dynamics that no longer serve us. I'm not saying letting go of relationships. There's a difference. I'm saying letting go of the dynamic, how you've been showing up in the relationship. How can you change the way that you're showing up in the relationship? Because you can't. I've been saying this from day one, and I've watched it play out in so many of the women's lives that I've coached. You cannot change another person, but you can 100% change the dynamic of a relationship by changing the way that you show up.
Right.
I've watched marriages heal because I haven't coached the marriage, but I've coached the woman and how she shows up in her marriage. Mariah, but how she shows up in her relationship starts changing the way her husband starts responding to her. We have so much more power than we realize, ladies. And we're called to co-lead with our husbands. It's not their responsibility to create a good relationship. So when we are changing the way that we're showing up because we're letting go, and this goes back to like expectations, right? Letting go of unrealistic expectations, letting go of the expectation for other people to meet our needs,
Yeah.
letting go of mindsets that are destructive, letting go of emotions that are restrictive, letting go of offense, letting go of unforgiveness, letting go of grief, learning how to work through it and let go of it so that it's not stifling us anymore.
Yeah.
We've talked about it before, but grief is when you really allow yourself and you learn how to move through the experience of the goal of grief is actually to expand you. And when we can work through it and get to that place of acceptance, which is letting go, acceptance, that's what opens up the expansion. So letting go is going to be huge. Spend some time asking yourself, what do I need to let go of this year so that I can show up with realistic expectations and I can show up as the version of myself that I want to be, which is hopefully a loving, kind, present, peaceful, generous, considerate, thoughtful, etc.
Mhm.
person. Somebody that people feel like they can take a deep exhale around, you
Yeah.
know?
Right.
Now, you're not responsible for how people perceive you. You could be that version of yourself. You could be that best version of yourself, and then there's still people that are not going to choose to see that. That's on them. You're not responsible for their perception of you. but you are responsible for how you're showing up and how you're treating people and how you're letting things affect you. So learning to let go of the right things in the right way is pivotal. It's a pivotal mindfulness practice and learning how to live a beautiful life and showing up in the next couple of weeks for Christmas and Thanksgiving,
Mhm.
Christmas and New Year's. Letting go, my talk about letting go at this time of year, this is a beautiful time to practice letting go.
Yeah.
What might you want to be letting go of? Maybe it was hopes or expectations that you had for yourself this year that didn't come to fruition. Do you want to carry that pain or the pressure to figure it out or force it into the next year? Or is it something that you want to grieve through and process through and release it, let it go, and start fresh in the new year? Maybe there's bitterness or resentment and hurt relationships. Do you want to carry that into the new year? Or is it time to sit down with yourself and work through it and figure out how to let that ish go? Ways that you judge yourself. We are so hard on ourselves as women, so self-critical. Is it time to let some of those things go? What is it time to let go of? Is it time to let go of the need to people please? Is it time to let go of the need to be perfect all the time? So, is there anything you want to add to letting go before we wrap up? 'Tis the time.
Good time.
'Tis the
Wait,
time to wrap up.
we didn't address the whole situation.
Our ugly sweaters. She
Ugly
definitely
sweaters.
won the prize. Not that there
Yeah.
was a prize, but Mariah says there's always a winner and she likes to win, so but she legit took this one. There's no competition between us. She won for best sweater.
Yes. Yeah, so there you go. Christmas.
Ah, Merry Christmas. All right, my friends. Well, this has been an intense episode. Yeah, I never really know where they're gonna go. I kind of have my little idea, but please know that when I'm passionate, it's because I'm passionate about your wellness and wholeness and freedom. I definitely am not here to make anybody feel badly about themselves, so I hope it doesn't come across that way. But I know that I really drilled in hard with the whole intentional theme, and I think it's because that is something that can create so much change in how one lives their life and in how one feels in one's life is when we start practicing intentionality. And I think it's because I see that in that level of intention is just not there for most women. And it's the remedy. It's learning how to live intentionally is the way beyond living from a place of exhaustion and burnout and disconnection and relationship and everything is on the other side of intention and growing and understanding what that looks like and what that means.
It's such a good episode. One of my faves for sure.
Today's?
Mhm.
So what did okay, so expectations, intention, letting go. Without getting into the details, we had said this would be a good episode for you. What were some of your big takeaways from this episode with what you're navigating through?
My big takeaways is definitely a reminder of keeping that perspective of how do I wanna show up, and having that sort of expectation, but in a compassionate way, passionate outlook for others that I'm in relationship with, that there's conflicts rising, I mean, at least for me. And then staying true to myself too, all in that process. Like, how do I want to show up moving forward, but set healthy boundaries and guard my heart well, but also keep in mind the relationship? Because, like you say, the goal is not no relationship. The goal is not to cut people out. The goal is healthier relationships, hopefully. And if there's no fruit from the relationship itself, at least I am doing my part in being intentional and letting go of what I need to let go of and setting expectations, realistic ones, but then managing expectations. So it's a good, it's a really good reminder and sets in deep. And I think it helped me to posture my heart better because mid-process. Before the episode, I was kind of still in the ick of my emotions and trying to figure out and navigate through, like, what's my next step and in that
Okay.
aspect. Yeah.
So good. Well, the surprise is that we didn't even tell you that there was a surprise, but the surprise is that there's going to be a bonus episode to this 4-part series, which means next week we're doing a bonus 5th part. It's going to be the week of New Year's Eve. And we're going to be talking about why now is not the time for you to set a New Year's resolution and what is best for you to do instead to start the new year off strong. So, this is something you definitely, it's an episode you're not going to want to miss. When I started learning about this information, it completely changed the way that I related with myself in some ways, and it brought a lot more compassion into my life. And it also brought a lot more renewal and a lot more productivity into my life as well. So I'm really excited. I've been wanting to talk about this topic for a really long time. We're going to touch on it next week, give you just enough to kind of get you over that new year hump. But then I would expect to learn more about it in the holding space in January. So if you haven't signed up for that, go to beautifulisalifestyle.com and sign up for the holding space. That is a free virtual gathering that we're going to be doing monthly, 90 minutes starting next year in January. And we're going to be focusing on soul renewal and soul care. And you're going to get to gather with us, the podcast crew, and then also with each other. And we're all going to get some real life time with one another. And we're going to break out into small groups, and Beth will lead a small group. Mariah will lead a small group. I'll lead a small group. And it's going to be a great place for us to get to know each other and grow with each other and learn more about how to actually put these great principles into practice, because information without integration does not create transformation. And we're here to help your life transform and level up. And then also, the Sacred Pause is a Bible study that I created end of 2023, launched it beginning of 2024, and it's work that I'm actually really quite proud of. And I felt like the Lord wanted me to morph it a little bit. And so we've refined the Sacred Pause. We've turned it into a spiritual formation group. So there is a 52-week Bible study reading plan that I created where every week you get a little bit of a commentary and contemplation from me. I have a little bit of a unique view on things if you've picked that up from me through this podcast so far. And that definitely includes scripture. I love to study scripture from the language, from the history, from the culture. I think I've learned over the years and decades of studying scripture that so much has been misinterpreted and misrepresented through the Western lens. So every week you get a little contemplative commentary from me that you read, and then you get a reading plan. And then once a month, we're going to be getting together for a spiritual formation group, and we'll be discussing different spiritual practices that can help you grow your relationship with God. Topics like how to hear God's voice, because Jesus said, "My sheep hear my voice," which means every single one of us have the ability to hear the voice of God. We just don't always know how to tune in to heaven's frequency. We're going to talk about things like prayer, and there's so many different types of prayer. We're going to talk about fasting. We're going to talk about Sabbathing. We're going to talk about all of the different practices that help us to grow our spiritual lives and deepen our intimacy with Jesus. So whether you've been on this path for a long time spiritually or you're curious, you're welcome to join. It's going to be this beautiful time of growing and exploring and learning from one another. And I really hope to see you in both. And then the other thing to think about is if you've been here with us for a while, I don't talk about it much, but I do one-on-one coaching. And so maybe you're thinking, I would really love to have Tanya be a sounding board in my life. I would really love these workbooks that they keep talking about. Maybe the Living Beautifully program is the perfect fit for you. So I want to encourage you, consider doing it next year. I do have the availability for a few one-on-one clients at this point, and maybe one of those spots is on hold for you. So you'd be so surprised at how much your life can change. The quality of your life can change in just a couple of months when
Um,
you have the right guidance and accountability. So there's a lot of us that are settling for things in our lives that we don't actually have to settle for. And I've watched women's lives be completely transformed. Time and time and time again, I hear clients tell me, I didn't even know my life could feel like this. I didn't even know my life could be like this. So that could be your story too. It doesn't matter what you've been through. It doesn't matter what your past is. Your future is bright. Sometimes you just need a little help getting you there. And I would be so honored to share that journey with you. So everything is at beautiful.com, but we'll also include the link in the description box for the episode. Is there anything that I am forgetting?
nope.
I remembered it all this week.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, then Merry Christmas, my friend. I hope
Merry
that you
Christmas.
have a beautiful Christmas, no matter what it is that you're doing. If it's you spending solo time alone, I've done it many times. If that's you, then I pray that you find a way to really enjoy it and be fully present with yourself and do something special in your own company. If it's with your family, I hope that there are a few of these mindfulness tips that we've given you that can help enhance the quality of your Christmas experience this year. And, Mariah, you wanna say anything as you send them off?
Merry Christmas, and I can't wait to see you guys in the new year, and you got this. You got this. Take it one day at a time and be kind to yourself. And yeah, that's it.
Yeah, yeah. Self-compassion is key. We can challenge ourselves, but everything has to be from a place of self-compassion. So, yeah, be kind to yourself, be kind to others, be generous with yourself, be generous with others, and, we'll see you next week for our New Year's Eve special.
Yay!